You know, in all my years in public life, from the governor's mansion in Little Rock to the Oval Office, I learned something that most people never think about. The most important political moments don't always come with fanfare. They don't arrive with cameras rolling or breaking news banners. Sometimes the thing that changes everything is a single voice saying what nobody expected them to say. And that's exactly what just happened. Now look, Marjorie Taylor Greene, and I want you to hear me clearly on this. This is a woman who built her entire political identity on one thing: absolute, unwavering loyalty to Donald Trump. She was his sword and shield in Congress. She defended him when nobody else would. She wore that loyalty like a badge of honor. And on Easter Sunday morning, April the 5th, 2026, she looked at what the President of the United States posted online: threats of bombing civilian power plants and bridges in Iran, laced with profanity on one of Christianity's holiest days. And she said, and I quote, "He has gone insane." She called it evil. She said everyone in his administration who claims to be a Christian is complicit. Now let me tell you something. When the most loyal soldier in the room turns around and says the mission is wrong, that's not gossip. That's not politics. That is a fracture in the foundation of a governing coalition during wartime. And most people haven't fully understood what that means yet, but they will. And we'll come back to that in a moment. Now, to understand why what Marjorie Taylor Greene said matters so much, you've got to understand the road that brought us here, because this didn't happen overnight. On February 28, 2026, the United States and Israel launched nearly 900 airstrikes against Iran in just 12 hours. Military targets, air defenses, command structures, even the supreme leader was assassinated. This was not a limited strike. This was the opening chapter of a full-scale war. And here's what I need you to remember. Donald Trump campaigned in 2024 on a very specific promise: no more foreign wars. That was the deal he made with his voters. That was the contract. And we'll come back to that because it matters enormously. Now, I've had to make hard calls on military force: Kosovo, Sudan, Afghanistan. And I can tell you from experience, every single time you commit American lives and treasure abroad, you better have a clear objective, a legal foundation, and an exit strategy. Every single time. Here's the honest truth about where things stand today. It's been 37 days. Gas prices have surged past $4 a gallon. The Strait of Hormuz, through which 1/5 of the world's oil passes, is effectively closed. The War Powers Resolution gives the president 60 days to operate without congressional authorization. That clock hits on April 29th. And yet both the House and the Senate voted down War Powers resolutions along party lines back in early March. Congress looked at its constitutional duty and walked the other way. So here we are, a nation at war with no formal declaration, no authorization, a ticking legal clock, and a president posting threats on social media. And this is where things start to get complicated. Now let me walk you through exactly what Marjorie Taylor Greene said, because the details here matter more than the headlines. On April 2nd, after Trump's primetime address to the nation. Green posted on X, and I want you to listen to her words carefully. She said, "I wanted so much for President Trump to put America first. All I heard from his speech tonight was war, war, war." She said there was nothing about lowering the cost of living, nothing about the nearly $40 trillion in national debt, nothing about Social Security going bankrupt, nothing about jobs, education, or our children's future. She said, "I'm so beyond done." Let me tell you something. That is not a policy disagreement. That is a political eulogy. Then on Easter morning, April 5th, she went further. She called Trump insane. She said his administration is complicit. She said, and these are her exact words, "This is not making America great again. This is evil." She accused the United States and Israel of starting an unprovoked war based on, quote, "the same nuclear lies they've been telling for decades." She called on every Christian in the White House to beg God for forgiveness. And how did the White House respond? They called her a quitter. Not a word about her actual arguments. Not one substantive rebuttal. Now, I don't agree with Marjorie Taylor Greene on most things. We've got very different views about this country. But here's what I know from decades in this business. When someone who was that close to the fire starts screaming about the smoke, you don't dismiss them. You check the building. Now I want to talk about something that's personal to me, because I've carried this weight. When you sit behind that desk in the Oval Office and you authorize the use of military force, whether it's cruise missiles against al-Qaeda camps in Afghanistan or air operations over Kosovo, there is a gravity that settles over you. You feel the lives hanging in the balance. And you understand down to your bones that every single word you say from that point forward is not just a statement. It's a strategic instrument. Your allies are listening. Your enemies are calculating. Markets are moving. And the men and women in uniform, the ones doing the actual fighting, they are watching what their commander-in-chief says, because it tells them whether the person sending them into harm's way understands what he's asking of them. Now, here's what happened on Easter Sunday morning. The President of the United States, with 15 American service members already dead, with over 3,500 people killed across the region, with an F-15 shot down over Iranian territory just days earlier, posted on Truth Social, and I quote, "Tuesday will be Power Plant Day and Bridge Day, all wrapped up in one in Iran. Open the fucking strait, you crazy bastards, or you'll be living in hell. Praise be to Allah." Let me tell you something. That is not wartime leadership. That is not how you protect American troops or reassure anxious allies or deter a desperate adversary. Threatening to bomb civilian power plants and bridges on Easter Sunday, signed off with a mocking religious phrase. Presidential words are policy. And when the policy sounds like a barroom dare, the whole world gets more dangerous. This isn't about partisanship. This is about the seriousness that the office demands and the lives that depend on it. Now we've got to talk about something that goes deeper than any one president or any one tweet. we've got to talk about our institutions, because they're the thing that's supposed to hold this country together when the politics get rough. The Constitution is very clear. The power to declare war belongs to Congress. The War Powers Resolution of 1973 says a president can commit forces for 60 days without authorization. But after that, Congress has to act. The strikes on Iran began February 28th. That 60-day clock hits on April 29th. That's 24 days from today. And what has Congress done? In early March, both the House and the Senate voted down war powers resolutions along party lines. The Republican majority looked at a war launched without their authorization and said, "We'll allow it." That is an abdication of constitutional responsibility that should concern every American, regardless of party. Now, here's where Green's critique connects to something much bigger. Just 2 days ago, the president submitted a budget requesting $1.5 trillion for defense, a 42% increase, while proposing cuts to agriculture, housing, the State Department, and humanitarian aid. We've got to remember, a budget is a moral document. It tells you what a nation values. And when you're writing blank checks for war while gutting the programs that keep families fed and housed, you are making a choice about who this country is for. When Marjorie Taylor Greene asks, "Who authorized this and who is this for?" she's asking the same questions the founders designed our system to answer. And right now, the system is failing to answer them. The guardrails are buckling. And if that 60-day clock expires with no authorization and the war continues, we will face the most serious constitutional confrontation over war powers since Vietnam. Now look, I've been in politics a long time. I've run campaigns, I've built coalitions, and I've watched them come apart. And I can tell you, what's happening inside the Republican coalition right now is not a little family squabble. This is structural. Marjorie Taylor Greene didn't break with Donald Trump because she suddenly became a liberal. She broke with him because she genuinely represents, a significant part of the MAGA base that voted in 2024 on one very specific promise: no more foreign wars. America first meant America first, not another trillion-dollar military adventure in the Middle East while gas hits $4 a gallon and Social Security inches toward insolvency. And it's not just her. Look at what she said about Fox News. She called it fake news, said it was brainwashing boomers into supporting a war that the base voted against. Now, when the most prominent MAGA voice outside the White House is telling Republican voters that the conservative media ecosystem is lying to them, that is a crisis of trust within the movement itself. And how did the White House respond to all of this? They called her a quitter. That's it. No substantive engagement with her arguments. No explanation of the war's objectives. No reassurance to the base that their concerns are being heard. When an administration at war cannot tolerate dissent, even from within its own ranks, when the only answer to criticism is a personal insult, that tells you something about the fragility of the entire enterprise. Here's what I'd say to my own party. Don't gloat. This isn't a moment for celebration. This is the moment for Democrats to offer a credible alternative, a serious vision for national security, for fiscal responsibility, for an America that leads through strength and diplomacy, not just bombs and social media threats. The coalition is fracturing, and 2026 could be a defining election, but only if Democrats earn it. Let me be honest with you about what comes next, because the next 30 days may be among the most consequential in modern American history. And I don't say that lightly. First, the Tuesday deadline. The president has told Iran to open the Strait of Hormuz or face strikes on their power plants and bridges. He has already bombed Iran's largest bridge last Thursday, killing at least 8 people and injuring 95. If he follows through, civilian casualties will mount, international condemnation will intensify, and the fracture within his own coalition will deepen. European and NATO allies have already rejected the legality of this war. Trump has even floated withdrawing from NATO. Every escalation makes that isolation worse. Second, the war powers clock. April 29th. If Congress doesn't pass an authorization for the use of military force and the war continues, we enter uncharted constitutional territory. The legal legitimacy of every military order after that date becomes questionable. That is not a hypothetical. That is a countdown. Third, the economic pressure. Gas prices have surged past $4 a gallon, up over 30% since February. The Strait of Hormuz carries 1/5 of the world's oil. Iran says it won't reopen the strait until it receives compensation for war damages. Every day that strait stays closed, American families pay the price at the pump and at the grocery store. That will be the defining issue of the 2026 midterms. Fourth, the political realignment. If more Republicans follow Green's path, especially those in swing districts, the governing majority could splinter before November. And fifth, if a diplomatic off-ramp is found, Trump will claim victory. But the damage to alliances, to institutions, to the economy, and to America's moral standing may already be done. Each of these paths carries profound consequences, and the country needs leaders in both parties who are willing to face them honestly. I want to come back to where we started, to what Marjorie Taylor Greene said. And I want to be clear, I'm not here to celebrate her. She and I disagree on just about everything. And I'd be less than honest if I didn't point out that she played a significant role in building the very political culture that made this moment possible. She spent years tearing down the guardrails of civil discourse, demonizing compromise, treating loyalty to one man as the highest political virtue. The fire she's now warning us about, she helped light the match. But here's the honest truth. When someone embedded that deeply in a political movement stands up on Easter Sunday and says, "This is evil," when she says Christians in the administration should be begging God for forgiveness, that warning deserves to be heard on its merits. Not because she's always right, but because the substance of what she's saying, that this war was unjustified, that the rhetoric is dangerous, that the promises made to the American people have been broken. Those are real concerns that millions of Americans share. I believe in an America where presidents don't threaten to bomb power plants on Easter morning, where Congress exercises its constitutional duty instead of hiding behind party line votes, where budgets reflect our values, investing in children and communities and opportunity, not just writing blank checks for war while gutting everything else, where disagreement is the lifeblood of democracy, not something to be punished with a nasty nickname. We've been through dark chapters before, and every single time, what saved us wasn't one party or one leader. It was the conscience of ordinary Americans who said, "This is not who we are." The fact that voices are rising now, however imperfect, however late, tells me that conscience is not yet silent. And as long as it isn't, I still believe in this country. I always will. Thank you for listening.